Hello and welcome to Follow the Money. I'm Robert Tan. Join us as we explore the tools and insights you need to jumpstart your financial journey. Today on Follow the Money, wealth creation, business fundamentals, and the future of Filipino MSMEs. As global and local economic shifts continue to challenge micro, small, and medium enterprises, we wonder, is now the best time to start a business? And joining us is a mentor to aspiring and established business owners across the country, the founder and CEO of Ask Lex PH Academy, Mr. Felix Concepcion Veroya. Good afternoon, Felix. Welcome to Follow the Money. Thanks for joining us today.
For inviting me to the show.
Yeah. Now, let's start with discussing wealth creation and starting a business for those who are not really familiar on how to start a business on that process. Now, you've mentored hundreds of individuals, entrepreneurs. Now, what is your view is the first mindset shift that needs to be made when deciding into going into business and starting fresh?
Yeah. So, well, most of us, specifically Filipinos, we're basically afraid to fail. So that's one thing. We're afraid to take risk. Well, for example, for my case, I've been an employee also for maybe about 6 or 7 years. And then I did start some businesses and most of them failed. And maybe after 10 tries, this has been a success, this particular business. And then I realized that it's really taking the first step that's very difficult for most of us. So it's really just breaking that inertia,
hurdle.
the first step. That very cliche as it may sound, but it's that's the mindset of shifting to something that you take the risk and you see. Of course, it has to be calculated. That's one thing. It doesn't have to be, I want this, and then you go without any backup system and whatnot. So I guess that's one thing that I also see. And most of us were always finding like what are the solutions, but not understanding what is the problem, for example, in this particular target segment that we want to help out. So I always tell my mentees that, especially the startups or the aspiring entrepreneurs, that you focus first on the pain points. We call them pain points in technopreneurship. And then you try to focus and try to come up with some solutions that you can introduce to address that pain points.
But usually when you say that first hurdle in thinking of going into business is actually the hardest in thinking. For those, let's say, who are employed but thinking of going into business but are kind of scared of the risks, what usually is your advice to them when you mentor them in the beginning?
So I always get the inspiration from what I did. So for the longest time, we had another business, and then we're doing it as a side gig during the weekends. And then eventually, when I saw that there's already the traction, me and my wife decided to go full-time for the business. So I always tell them that, yes, again, calculated risk, you can first build a backup system so that when, for example, your idea or business idea failed, you can still go back to, of course, to corporate, but you're not sacrificing or compromising whatever priorities or whatever things you have to work on for.
Now, when you're talking about risk, that's also one obstacle. But another obstacle that usually some people are scared of is sometimes they think you need a big amount of capital to start a business. Now, what's your perspective on starting small but growing slowly and growing bigger?
Yeah.
Do you really need a huge chunk of capital to start?
Well, first, it depends on what business you're going to go into. But one thing that I have realized, and I always tell my mentees, is that you can do a proof of concept first. So first, you have to test. Of course, you don't invest hundreds and thousands or millions, right off the bat. But you have to see whether, if you're going to introduce this particular product or enter to this particular segment, is there really attraction that is feasible? Okay, are really customers willing to pay for whatever you are giving them or selling them? So it's really creating first that proof of concept, or I would say success story, and then from there you can actually grow and scale your business.
In starting a business, for those who want to start, there's a lot of businesses to choose from. But in your opinion, what's an underrated business model or industry in the Philippines right now that could be a gold mine for aspiring entrepreneurs today?
Yeah, I think one would be still there's a gap when it comes to digital products and whatnot. So there's a lot of improvements already. I'm seeing a lot of digital products also that is tied up with the gig economy or the sideline things that we do as Filipinos. And I think since we're an agricultural country, processed products coming from our produce is actually underrated. If you happen to notice, there's a lot of food wastage in different parts of our country. It's mainly because we don't have that knack of processing it and turning it into something else and then putting more value actually to it and then you sell it. We were stuck in the idea that it has to be the fresh produce. So those two, I think, are two undermined areas for entrepreneurship.
Now, you mentioned that going into business, there has to be a certain type of knowledge that you need. So how essential do you think is financial literacy in wealth creation? And what are some, let's say, simple or actionable ways that entrepreneurs can upskill in this area?
Yeah, well, financial literacy is for me is a must. I mean, you cannot do entrepreneurship if you don't understand how your money flows. Well, specifically, if you're going to start a business, the common mentality, and this is where most of the entrepreneurs, I think not only in the Philippines, but across the globe, has it wrong. You always separate your personal finance and of course your business finance. Yes. So I always tell it to my wife because my wife is our finance both in personal and business. So I always tell her that you have to separate whatever we earn from the business. It's not ours. Yeah. You keep a percentage to compensate for of course for the efforts and for working for the business, but it's not entirely ours because most of the time when you put some money and then it earned some portion of that and then you get more than what you need or more than what is required for your personal finances, which leaves the business, of course, you don't have funds anymore to grow and scale.
So you think that's where a lot of the small businesses go wrong when they don't know where to draw the line between their personal finances and the operation costs of their business?
That's one thing, of course. And then, of course, financial literacy transcends also into their knowledge of entrepreneurship. Because if they don't understand exactly how their business model works, there could be a lot of mistakes that can be done. And that would mean to, of course, losing the business. So understanding also business models, how like basic accounting, basic inventory management, all those things depending on, of course, the type of business they are into.
Now, how do you think now, because of the digital age, everything's online, and people see a lot of these businesses that are growing online, but not all of them are true. How do you fix that and help your mentees in terms of what kind of businesses they should start? Because when we sift through the internet, there's quick ways of growing your money, businesses that easy money. How do we escape that?
Well, not only individuals, but also I had experienced cooperatives asking for help because they've been into situations that they lose the funds of the cooperatives because of those kind of schemes. I always tell them that you have to understand first. If it's too good to be true, it's very cliche, then don't do it. Don't invest your money to it because they have to understand how the money is being generated and how money is being returned to them as they invest their own money or their funds and whatnot. So they have to understand first how money is being created or generated. Because if not, they're planning to fail to that particular area.
Is there also a way that you can help them in terms of is this business fit for them? Because there are a lot of businesses that are good and are doing well, but sometimes it might not be fit to what you're doing. There are other people who are making a lot of money in this type of business, but maybe it's not for you. How can you distinguish that and help them?
Well, for me, I don't know if it's a popular opinion, but I always believe with personal strengths. So what I do is, and also for startups that I mentor, is that I ask them to answer some set of questions that would reveal their personal strengths. And from there, depending on the business model, depending on the type of business that they wanted to go into, I try to do a mapping, whether are your characteristics, your personal traits, is it a good fit to the type of business that you want to enter? So those kind of things we do. But of course, I'm not saying that if you're not totally fit, it's not gonna work. It's really, I don't know if there's a science into it, but sometimes it takes a lot of, maybe, for example, determination.
Luck? Or sometimes
That could be a
That could
factor,
be a
of course.
factor, yeah.
Right?
But we were talking a while ago also about financial literacy and how to deal with your money, your personal expenses, and the expenses of your business. Now, besides that, what else are the most common mistakes in terms of money mistakes that entrepreneurs make, and what kind of practical advice can you give them to avoid these mistakes?
Well, one is they have to also understand what is the cash flow. So it's not that you're like getting sales and whatnot. You're cash flow positive. So, and I think that would go into the idea that most of the time they don't know exactly the cost structure that is involved in the business. They only put, for example, certain cost elements, but they forgot to put like some factors like the labor or utilities and whatnot. And so when they only see, like, for example, some sales, but they don't see the actual cost that is involved into that particular sale. So that would mean that it creates an illusion that they're earning, but in reality they're losing money.
Now, when you're talking with and mentoring our MSMEs here in the Philippines, what are the biggest pain points when they talk to you that they're currently facing here in the Philippine business landscape, especially in the post-pandemic era?
Well, post-pandemic era, I think one would be the change in consumer behavior. For some businesses were into the traditional businesses, and then the disruption happened. So going outside the pandemic, so they don't know how to stabilize. So whether they're gonna pivot or not. So those are because of the changes. But of course, most popular would always be access to capital, even for our business, right? That would be always
That's always the
challenges.
biggest problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. But now, do you think there's enough help by the government in terms of helping our MSMEs? There is the DTI that helps a lot of small businesses, but is that enough in terms of helping the small players grow?
I think with a lot of government programs and for which the DTI is involved, the other agencies also, there could be improvement opportunities still. Because, for example, let's say, for example, for my case, for our case, we haven't had the opportunity to be part of the program. So maybe there is some sort of gap that has to be filled in when it comes to promoting also the programs and providing access to most of the businesses. I'm not quite sure and involved with if there are like road shows or regional activities or campaigns that are being done. But I've seen quite a lot in the news of what they're doing, and I think that's a good start. But really, going to the grassroots entrepreneurs in the provinces would be a good campaign also, or strategy.
Now, in terms of access to capital, there are banks that do help entrepreneurs, but sometimes it's entrepreneurs that already are going concern and already making money. But are there alternative access to capital to MSMEs who have not really grown yet but need that that boost so that they can start earning? Is there any other alternatives besides the banking system here?
Yeah,
that they can go
actually,
to?
yeah. Just like what I mentioned earlier, there are programs by the government, if I'm not mistaken, DOST or DTI, DICT, they have programs, specifically DOST, even in the regional level, that, for example, if a business needs some sort of investment for the machines, they can have some interventions. They have quite a lot of programs, and it depends on the need of the business, on the particular amount of the investment that is needed, the kind of technology that is needed, and whatnot. So they can apply for some grants. Okay, the government has that through DOST programs, if I'm not mistaken. And there are also a lot of booming startups, emerging startups in the space of Yeah, this kind of things like financial. Okay, so we call them fintech. But what they do is not only B2C but also B2B, or they provide some small loans for certain entrepreneurs or businesses.
But we've talked about government help. Are there any in the private sector that also help our MSMEs in terms of access to funds?
Yeah, I guess so. There
But
are.
before you answer that, Felix, we're just getting started. A lot of insights and learnings that still here. Follow the Money returns after a short break. You're still watching Follow the Money. We are exploring everything from common pitfalls to hidden opportunities with AskLex PH Academy CEO Felix Veroya. Okay, Felix, we were talking about access to capital.
Yep.
We talked about the help by the government through DTI and other institutions. Now we were looking at banks, but then we were talking a while ago. Are the banks really helping our entrepreneurs? Because I don't know if I'm correct. But we were discussing a while ago that for a small business to loan from a bank, they have to be seen as profitable
yeah.
and 2 years running na.
Yeah.
But a lot of our small businesses actually just need a boost for them to actually grow and
Yes.
not profitable yet, but nearing that part.
Yeah.
And it's hard for them to get access to capital. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, basically that's the problem, because if you ask for an aspiring entrepreneur or a growing business to provide that profitability traction, most of the time it may not be available, which leads businesses to just go with their day in day out without the growth and scale that they need. So they're basically some sort of like ceiling for them right now. That's where, of course, as you mentioned, alternative
Yes.
sources of funding might be available. As I mentioned, there are startups that focuses on giving access to capital, but just like what we talk about, they have to be very careful and cautious about as they engage, because there's a lot. Because most of us, not individuals, not just entrepreneurs, when you are given the terms of agreement, you don't really read it. You just accept it.
You have to read the small.
Because this expose you to risk.
Yes.
Okay? And you'll be surprised. You loan, for example, to what you mentioned, like 50,000, but you're being asked to pay for like 70 or even 80,000. So
that's around 30-40%
yes. So
interest.
yeah, but there are legit, of course, startups, legitimate startups that they could. It has to be undergoing into a proper due diligence, I would say. And that's where your question earlier about financial literacy would come into the picture.
I've also seen several funders of startups that are around helping these small businesses. But is that enough? Is the private sector big enough to help the growing number of MSMEs here? A lot of them, because of also lack of access to capital, don't have enough money to register all the way through their business permits, and some of them become informal businesses. So how can we lessen that, do you think?
I think with the creation of certain laws, like the CREATE and the other laws that are pertinent to that, entrepreneurs are now having access to getting their business registered, because that's one thing. We could operate in a state that, as you mentioned, informal, but growth is not in that area. You cannot, of course, interact with other businesses that is registered or that are registered if you're not registered. So basically, you're losing opportunities for that matter. And because of this law that has been passed, I think it helps to encourage more and more entrepreneurs to formalize or to register their business.
Do you think the digital space is helping in terms of online registration? But sometimes it's only good in the beginning. You register your business online, but you still have to do the other steps manually. So is there part of that also needs to be done by the government
Yeah.
so at least it could be digital from start to finish.
Yeah.
Hindi lang yung first part lang, but then you have to go manual.
I understand.
pa rin. The
I
other-
actually experienced that during this past season of
How long-
renewing our
How long does it take? How long did it take for you to
well-
register and get your business permits from start to finish?
It took us, because of the delays, maybe 2-3 weeks.
3
because
weeks.
we have to, as you mentioned, it's
But that's
kind
still
of
pretty quick.
Yeah.
Some go for several months sometimes.
Oh yeah, but maybe because of the it's fragmented, just like what
Yeah.
you mentioned, that you have to maybe you're gonna start uploading some
Yeah.
files. On the beginning, it's online, right?
Yeah, online, then they
But
ask you for the hard copy.
Yes, in between. So it has to be holistic, and because we don't want to just introduce the technology for the sake of introducing the technology. It has to be something that's gonna create value for, of course. This works also for the business persons and entrepreneurs, not only for our government. It has to be like very holistic. Not just for the purpose of just showcase and that we're doing this technological adaptation and whatnot.
Now, we were discussing a while ago, you were saying there has to be a certain mindset to have for you to start a business. But let's say somebody already started a business, it's been ongoing, but they hit a plateau. What do you think can they do? What's missing? Is it they're scared to grow more? Because sometimes when you say when a business grows, are they growing too fast or too slow? Where's that thin line? So that, because when you grow too fast, sometimes you run out of money as well. And that causes businesses to close down. But when you also grow too slow, then others can get ahead of you, and then you also have to close down because you run out of customers. So where's that thin line? Where's that mindset there that they need?
Yeah, probably it's the mentality is if most of the business would want to be stable, and then when they achieve that particular state, they become complacent of things. So they don't want to, again, they enter to a state that they're comfortable. So they don't want to move from another uncomfortable state which is basically growth, right? So for me, it's really, again, trying to look on the trends on how they could capitalize. Because sometimes the plateau also is coming from their target consumer or customer doesn't now get enough of what they're asking or that they're looking for from this business. So they get to choose alternatives. So that's why we also have, as entrepreneurs, we have to also check whether our products and services that we offer originally, is it still relevant to the market? So we have to check from time to time, because that's what we're doing. We're checking for the trends, and then if we see that it's not relevant anymore, then we have to modify or tweak something so that it becomes relevant still.
And let's finally, now looking into the future, now what global or technological trends should the MSMEs now start looking into in terms of preparing for now to stay competitive and, as you mentioned, relevant in this business landscape?
Yeah, cliche as it may sound, digitalization of the business, right? Most of the business, they don't have social media pages. Okay? And sometimes social media pages is not enough. They need to transition into, let's say, for example, websites and whatnot. Some may be favoring the use of mobile applications and whatnot. And now we're in the age of AI. So basically, if you're not in that social media space yet, and AI is happening, there's a lot of catch-up that needs to be done for this business. So I would always suggest not just to jump into, again, adapting this kind of technologies. They have to understand first the technology, and they have to check whether and assess their business on how they could integrate this kind of technologies moving forward.
Yeah, so very good. So you really have to look at the financial literacy part and also the digital platform literacy part also, because it goes hand in hand now. So lastly, what advice would you have to the entrepreneurs right now?
Entrepreneurship is not easy. So you have to have a strong heart and mind to always pursue. And I always believe that if you think that you are solving a problem for someone and that you're creating value for someone, it fuels you to always go beyond what you can imagine.
Never stop, right?
Yes.
Never stop. Okay. Anyway, so Thank you for joining us, Lex, and your insights on business and how to help our MSMEs. Wealth creation isn't just about money. It's about vision, strategy, and tenacity. And we thank Felix of Ask Lex PH Academy for empowering our viewers with continuous learning. And before we go, a brief reminder from motivational speaker and author Zig Ziglar. You don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. And that's it for today's edition of Follow the Money. I'm Robert Sang. Thanks for watching. Keep it here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel.